I will tell you that the most important person to me is the person that I'm engaged with at that moment. And so I make sure that I'm giving them full commitment in that conversation. So, and one of the things I'll say is I'll ask them, have you been looking for a church for a while? That question opens up so many doors for so many people. And typically the last thing I'll say is, well, look, I know that looking for a church can be an extremely stressful time for you and your family. So I'm going to pray for you guys that the Lord would help you to find wherever it is you need to be.
Well, Castleview, thank you so much for joining us once again today for our podcast. Today's is a little bit different. We have one of our church members, Jeremy Fincher. He and his family have been here now for a couple of years, and he heads up our guest services program at our church, has done an amazing job with that. And he's just got a lot of unique highlights. And we have a lot of very interesting events coming up. One of them I want to highlight is our Christmas at Castleview service. That's December 14th and 15th. And every single year, this is such an incredible highlight of our church. We've got a film that's been done, professionally done. We've got people in our church that have acted in it. And we are going to be giving the gospel out at both of those service times. We've got one Saturday night, two on Sunday morning, and they're going to hear the gospel in the music. They're going to get the gospel in the film, and they're definitely going to get the gospel in the preaching that day as well. And that's what we're all about at Castleview. We want to make sure that we share the gospel faithfully. And so I wanted to have just a few moments with the leader of our guest services team, Jeremy Fincher, and I wanted to get some ideas about how we as a church can be thinking about inviting people out, not relying on social media to do that, but for us to individually be inviting people out and the importance of it. And so, Jeremy, thank you so much for being a part of this and joining the discussion today. I want you to know you have been one of the most refreshing people that we have had come into our church in a number of years, and a lot of the culture that we've been really trying to build here at the church, you and your family have been such a big part of it. So first of all, thank you for that. Can you tell us, how did you all get to the church? How'd you find us?
Well, I was just thinking it's been coming up on 4 years since we've been in Colorado, and March the 29th of 2021 was my first day in Colorado, and then the family followed in June of 2021. We joined in October of that same year. So, it's been quick. Like, it's amazing how quickly we've already been 3 years at the church. So, but we moved here from Mississippi, and we came in with work. That's what brought us here. And,
can I just interject this real quick? They came in from Mississippi.
Yes, sir.
He's speaking Southern right now. So if you're having a hard time, we'll put the subtitle. You get the subtitles. You know, make sure you go to the little CC right there and the closed captioning. And so we'll get it. So I'm sorry. Go ahead. So you came in and your work. And how'd you find our church? You look us up online?
I didn't find the church. Actually, my wife did. And so she was researching areas where we wanted to live. My work said you can live anywhere on the Front Range. Mm-hmm. And so it opened up the whole state essentially. So she looked at Castle Rock and liked what she saw. And then she said, well, we've got to find a church. And so she found Castleview through the website.
Okay.
And at that time, I think there was maybe 3 churches that actually put out the Baptist name on their title. I think there's others, but they don't maybe use the title. Mm-hmm. And so we had looked online. We saw the website, and you guys had the I Love My Church Sunday, and you had the little testimonial videos.
Yes.
And so we watched those, and I was like, wow, these people seem real. They seem genuine. And she's like, that's going to be our church. And we looked at one house in Castle Rock. That was it. We bought it the same day. And that's, we drove over to the church that Sunday, our very first Sunday in Castle Rock.
Okay, so I got to ask, and I don't know the answer to this, so I may be setting myself up for failure here. What was your experience? Now that you're on the guest services, you lead that ministry.
Yeah.
What was your experience that very first week? Anything stand out to you that day?
Yeah, I mean, it would be, number one, it was Wanda. And she calls herself Wanda number 2. And we sat on, facing the stage on the left, which that was the only Sunday we ever sat over there. We sat on the right side every week after that, but that was in the Sutton facility. And so we came in, we sat down, and Wanda came over to where we were. We had been sitting down maybe a minute, and she said, "Hi, my name's Wanda number 2." And she said, "You're in my section." And she said, "If you're going to sit here, you got to tell me your names, and I have to know who you are." And so she did it in such a funny way, she was pretending to be rude, but she was anything but. We just got a really good laugh. So we told her who we were, and that was very relaxing. Okay, we got that out of the way. We know somebody now. She knows who we are. Yeah. And then I remember that Sunday you had preached, and it seems like you had brought some people up on stage and some younger guys, and you gave them like one guy was Samson, and anyways, you were really aggravating them or criticizing them in such a comical way. And so when we left, my kids was like, "I loved how you made fun of everybody, Dad." So that week you reached out to me and you were like, "What'd you think?" And I said, "Well, my kids loved it." I was like, "They loved your preaching. They loved how you criticized and how you made it engaging and used people." Yeah. And you said, "Yes, I am an equal opportunity criticizer."
Right. So I feel like I should buy the T-shirt and hand it out that says "Sarcasm, it's how I hug," and just let people know, right?
Yeah.
And I think I said I'm an equal opportunity offender.
Yeah,
right. I'll offend people. I have once you get to know me, obviously it's in good fun.
Right.
Wanda 2, she calls herself that because we have a Wanda. That Wanda 1
was there first.
Right. She was at our very first service we ever had, and so Wanda Randall will call herself Wanda 2
Wanda number 2.
When she introduces herself to people. So good experience overall. What is the role of the guest services? What are you trying to accomplish? You've got a good sized team right now, and we're building that all the time. We're adding hosts now as well, and they've got a little bit of a different role also. What is the role of the guest services team?
It's such a good question. I would say that, looking at it, if you were to make an application that says, do you qualify? And I would say it would be one line, and it's just simply people that love people. And that's truly what guest services is. It's just a group of people who love people, and that's the people that gravitate over there. But I would say the long and short of the responsibility is just make them feel welcome. Yeah. You don't want to overcomplicate it, but people are coming in with maybe some idea of what is to expect, but the guest services team set the tone. And we used to call it first impressions, and it still truly is that first impression. And if we don't do a good job when they walk through the door, we don't greet them, we don't meet them, then it's going to be extremely difficult for you to reach them with the gospel. Yeah. It's going to be difficult for the worship team to really penetrate them with the music.
There are obstacles right away, right?
Absolutely.
When somebody walks into church, your guard is up a little bit.
Absolutely.
A lot of people have had bad experiences in different places. Yeah. And our mission at Castleview is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus.
Yes.
And I preach this. You know this. We believe this is true. That from the nursery worker to the guest services team to the ushers to any volunteer all the way to the pastoral staff, every single person has a role to play that is helping lead people. You say, well, what about nursery? How does a nursery worker? Well, a nursery worker is taking the pressure off of mom.
Right.
And they're loving those babies, giving good care so that mom can sit in a service, dad can sit in a service and feel like they're relaxed and they've been made comfortable and now they can hear the word. Maybe for the first time they can hear about Jesus. And so since that is our mission, we want to remove all of the obstacles that we possibly can. People come in, well, I've had some church hurt, and that happens. People come in and, well, I know what church is all about. I've been treated this way at church. And so you want to remove those obstacles as best you can.
Right.
And so your role, and I believe if you were honest with us right now, you would say you would love to enlist every single member of the church. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Not just you, not just your team,
Right.
but we want to make it a culture that people are loved. We've often said this, that people are not looking for a friendly church.
Looking for a friend.
People are looking for friends, right? And what's the difference with that?
I think it's pretty simple when you think about the fact that people are coming to church, and we like to think, oh, everybody comes to church because they want they want a relationship with God. They want, to hear the preaching. They are there to receive those things, but at the heart of it, they're truly looking for relationships.
Yeah.
And all those things they can receive those things as long as they find that connection.
Doesn't it make you nervous? It makes me nervous. Doesn't it make you nervous when you see somebody come in and no one talks with them?
Absolutely.
Or maybe you've noticed that, hey, they've been here 3, 4, 5 times.
And there's no connection.
And they're not connecting with
Right.
anybody. And the word in the New Testament, koinonia, they did life together. There was a fellowship together. And the people that are the most successful at staying at a church, they are people that it's not just they like the preaching, it's not just they like the music. They have made a connection
Right.
with somebody.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the difference between a first, second, and third time guest and then a person that is faithful. And that's how you get to go from being a guest to feeling like you're part of the church. And it's all in that connection. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
But I think that is the difference between feeling like a guest and feeling like I belong here.
Yeah.
You belong there because you've made the connection with some people.
Yes. And you were just telling me some interesting statistics about how many people we have first-time guests each
Right.
Sunday. But then you were also saying numbers of second, third, fourth-time
Yeah.
guests we've been having as
Yeah.
well. What remind us, tell the audience what that is.
I would say it's easily over 20 or at least 20 of second, third, and fourth time guests every single week.
Every single week.
Every single week. We've got about 20, maybe more on some weeks. And so, those are people that I'm like, alarms are going off. Hey,
Those are the
Yes.
best connections, right? I
Yes.
mean, they came in once. And by the way, more people are watching online first.
Right.
So even when they come in one time, they kind of know who we are. But they've come before. And so if they've come that second time, to me, those are the best guests, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, the music didn't offend them, the preaching didn't bother them. You know what I mean? That there wasn't
Right.
anything that first time. They looked at our church and said, "Hey, this is a place that we resonate with," and so those are such good prospects. And I feel like, I don't know how you feel, I feel like if we've had someone come 3 times, almost always they're with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if they haven't made a connection at 3 times, I don't think they're coming back. A lot of times,
Yes.
I think there is a teeter-totter at that moment.
Yes.
It's like, are they going to find their group or are they going to
Yes.
go somewhere else? Because that's truly what they're missing.
Yes.
They're getting the preaching, they're getting the singing. They have everything offered, child care and all these
Yes.
facilities.
Yes.
But if they don't find the connection, I think that they're going to go somewhere else where they can find the connection.
Okay, so let's talk about that because I think this is really important what you're saying right now. So I've read several years ago about 3 rules of engagement at church, and I live by these rules. You live by these rules, but I think every church member should live by these rules. And think about it this way: if somebody was in our service midway through the service, if somebody passed out, that they had some physical problem, we would mobilize, right? I mean, the church would absolutely mobilize. We've got nurses that are there. We've got people we've got a doctor. We would be all over that situation. We would get them the care that they need. And I want our church to think about it like this. We've got people every single Sunday that come to church in various degrees of spiritual need, right? Some of them don't know Jesus. Well, that's an emergency. Some of them have wandered from Christ for quite some time. Some of them know him, but are searching. There's all kinds of varying needs. And so we need to be willing to not just give physical help if somebody needed it. We need to give spiritual help because that's why they've come, right? And so there's 3 rules of engagement I read several years ago that they resonated with me, and we talk about them a lot, and I want to talk about these. The first rule of engagement is this: An alone person
Is an emergency.
Right. Right. What does that mean?
If they're alone, what's the reason?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are they alone? And it's like it becomes everybody's priority. If you're within 15 feet of somebody that's by themselves, I would love to see the church embrace that person.
Yeah. By the way, when I say alone, we're not even talking about like a single individual.
Right.
We're talking even about a couple
Right.
that nobody in the church is talking to and engaging with.
Right. Exactly. And that's when it becomes everybody's responsibility. As a pastor, you cannot truly connect with every person in that church. And if you're the only connection to that person, then it's going to be easy for that person to become offended. But the more layers that you add to a relationship or to a church with an individual, you can have one of those layers kind of fall apart. But that person's not going to leave because they've got other layers. They've got other relationships.
More friends, more relationships, right? So isn't that what Jesus told us too, right? Jesus told us that, he looks out and he says, they come and say, hey, your mom's here. And he says, well, who is my mother?
Right.
And who are my brothers?
Right.
And he wasn't forgetting he had these physical relationships, but he was highlighting that there was a special bond in the family of God.
Absolutely.
Right? There were certain relationships that were going to be deeper. And I feel like to people that attend our church, the closest relationships they have are in the church.
Yes.
It doesn't mean they don't have any friends outside of the church. We should have friends outside of the church, and we should have some unsafe friends because we're trying to reach people with the gospel. But when you see an alone person, and I want our church to hear this, when our church sees an alone person, somebody's not talking to somebody in our church, whether they are members, whether they've been around a long time, or whether they're brand new, we really should put aside our own comfort at that point and say, you know what, let me go and have a conversation. Let me go say hello to that person and engage with that individual.
That's the word. Yeah, engage with that person. It's kind of like doing something on purpose.
Yeah.
And it's not casual, but you have purpose, you have meaning behind this is why I'm here. It's to learn who you are. It's to get your name. It's to make an acquaintance. And that means a lot to somebody, and every guest that walks in, I think that they have a little bit of fear. There's some apprehension, there's some nerves playing into it. And, I think they have, it's just like, how quick can I get to this seat?
Yeah.
How quick can I get out of the limelight? Because the first thing they think is every person in this church is looking at me.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's just like, how do we tear down that barrier?
Yeah.
And that's the guest services job.
Yeah.
It's when they walk to us and we walk to them. I think about it even scripturally, and the scripture teaches us that draw nigh to him and he'll draw nigh to you.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's the job of the church. So as that person's coming to us, we're going to them. And there's just some power in taking steps towards an individual rather than letting them come to me.
Yeah. Let me ask you something. Let me follow up with this because I think that we've all experienced at times, well, Pastor, I tried to reach out to this guy and it was like he did not want to talk. And so now I just don't talk to people. It was an awkward conversation. Now I'm not doing that anymore, right? How would you handle because sometimes we have that. Someone comes and they just want to go find a spot, and you can just tell they just really don't want to talk to anybody. And sometimes it's because they're hurting. Sometimes they do. And by the way, some people come to church and they have we have a kind of a peppy, fun culture at our church, and people like conversation. Some people come from a background that, hey, when church starts or right before church starts, this is a holy, reverent time.
Yeah.
And so I want to go find my spot and I want to prepare my heart. I've got no problem with that, obviously. But how would you recommend, how do you handle it when somebody maybe is not quite, okay, you have to have a little discernment, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Wiley told me that I'm an introvert's worst nightmare.
Here he comes.
Yeah. Because, I'm running at them at the parking lot, I would say one thing that helps me is the further away from the crowd I can engage with that person, the more likely that I can connect with them in that moment. The closer to the crowd that we are, the less likely it is that I'm going to get a meaningful conversation out of them. So that's why, it's very important to go to them, number one, because there you've eliminated the crowd, you've eliminated anybody's going to hear their answers, and so that's one thing that helps a lot.
Yeah.
The other thing is just simply the body language. I noticed that if somebody's shoulder is to my face, I know that they're not committing to the conversation.
They're wanting to walk.
Yes, yes. And some people keep walking.
Yes.
I'm like, hey, I'm Jeremy. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. I'll see you when I leave.
So at times I will allow the person to go on by, and typically the team will notice that. We're watching each other. We see the person. The next person's not going to try to stop them, and I'll typically let them go to their seat. And I've even went back in before service starts, and I'll engage them at their seat. And at times that helps.
Yeah.
They're finally comfortable. They've had a minute to look around. They've gotten their bearings together. And then at that moment, I can come up and say, hey, I didn't get a chance to meet with you, but I'm Jeremy. Get their names. And then we've got about 3 questions we'll ask.
Sure.
And so, that helps them just to feel at ease. And you have to have discernment. The
discernment comes in with, okay, I can tell that this person just doesn't want to engage, and that's okay. And typically what I'll do with people like that is once I kind of discern, okay, you know what? It's not just that they're an introvert. It literally is, I think they would be more comfortable if I walked away.
Right.
Well, I want them to be as comfortable as possible, so I need to be okay with that. And so usually what I'll say is, hey, listen, if there's anything that I can do, I'm right over here. You let me know. And I try to leave that open-ended or whatever, but sometimes they just don't want to have a conversation. Don't force one if they don't want to have one.
Well, when it's a family, it's a little bit easier.
It is.
Because I've noticed that not everyone in the family feels the same way. As typically, the male, the dad, the husband is going to be the first one by. And sometimes he'll blow right by, but the wife is willing to stop and engage. I'm more than willing to talk to her. But I found that with families with kids, the easiest thing for me to do is I crouch down on one knee and I talk to the youngest. And if I'm engaging with that youngest kid, I'm asking them crazy questions like, hey, are you married? Where do you work? I
love that. Are you married?
Yeah.
So it's funny because I know you have a good connection with the kids. And when you have a good connection with the kids, the parents automatically like you.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Not a weird connection, weird relationship. You're not being inappropriate in any way, but when you connect with those kids on a different level. I know that about 3 weeks ago, we were all outside at the end of the service, and there was a little boy, and he had his mom and dad there, and they're having a conversation. Hudson came up to you and, hey, let's race.
Let's race.
You want to race, and you guys raced, outside. And I believe he whooped you pretty good, actually, if I remember right.
Yeah, it was a little unfair because I'm old, but
but I noticed that connection that you have with people, and so I appreciate that. So the first rule of engagement is an alone person is an emergency. The second rule of engagement is friends can wait. Now that sounds kind of funny to say friends, because you have friends there and you want to be able to enjoy those friends, but you will see your friends, right? If you're connected with a church, you're connected with a life group.
Absolutely. Yep.
And life groups on Sunday evenings are really the best time to be able to sit. You give time in your life group, others, you're sitting around a table, you're fellowshipping. Even Sunday morning, you have time to be able to get over to your friends, but friends can wait.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I will tell you that the most important person to me is the person that I'm engaged with at that moment. And so I make sure that I'm giving them full commitment in that conversation. So people notice as I'm standing there talking with guests, doing the guest services role as long as I have, I know just about every person walking by, and they know me. And so they're the first person I see typically, and they want to engage with me, but I have to really lock in because as they're walking by, they're trying to get my eye. They're trying to shake my hand. They're trying to say good morning, but I try not to look away. I want to focus on this person.
That is so important. I'm glad you brought that up. About 3 years ago, maybe 4 now, I had one of our church members, and I was locked into a conversation with he and his wife, dear people, love them, and we're locked in this conversation, and my mind is always on the guest, right? And my mind is always on, okay, there's people that I've never met before that I might not have a chance to meet again, and so I can get distracted easily. Well, I'm talking to you, but I'm looking over your shoulder because here comes somebody, and this was a bigger problem a few years ago. And I went over later, a week or two later, to meet with this couple over some random thing. I don't remember. We're just having a conversation. And he said, Pastor, I just want you to know something. You really hurt our feelings. We were a little bit offended by it. We tried not to be offended by it. We're mature. But I just want you to know, I want to share this with you, that we were locked in a conversation with you. And all of a sudden, you're over here. And he said, I know they were newer people, but, we were kind of locked in a conversation. And I really took that to heart, that, okay, the person that I'm talking to right now, I want them to feel like they have all of my attention. Jim Elliott said, wherever you are, be all there. And so I
Deion
really
Sanders
tried.
also said that.
Who said that?
Deion
Sanders.
This will be the first Deion Sanders reference on the podcast, but Deion said, be wherever your feet are.
Be where your feet are.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I didn't expect that to come up today, but I relate with it. I love it. That's the idea, though, right? That okay, if I'm talking to somebody, I need to give them my attention.
Right.
Now, I understand I can't give everyone 10 minutes.
Right. No.
But even if it's 90 seconds, I need to be engaged with you before I move on to somebody else. I think that's a great point.
And I found out that it's better to not even engage with that individual at all
if you're
not going to be committed to the engagement in the moment.
Yes.
It's better just to not even engage.
That's a great point.
If you don't have the time to commit to the engagement.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
So friends can wait. You're going to have, if you're plugged in, and we're talking right now, people that are listening to this podcast are people plugged into our church.
Right.
They have friends. They will see their friends.
Yes.
We have events. You're going to see your friends. You can go and see. You don't have to talk with new guests the entire time.
Right.
But let's not forget about those guests. So that's the number 2 rule of engagement. And then the third rule of engagement is this, and I think this is really important. And you referred to this just a moment ago with the layers conversation. Always introduce a newcomer to someone else. That's important.
It is.
Whenever someone comes in, and they tell me something about themselves. And by the way, this is interesting. Maybe before we even go further, what are some of the opening conversations or questions you might ask somebody when you meet them?
So, typically one of the first things I ask is, how did you hear about the church?
Yeah, I do too.
Because that opens up the door. Were they invited by somebody?
Yeah.
Okay, if
do
they were
they
invited,
know somebody I want to
let's
pair
go
them up
find
with
them.
right now? Yes.
Yeah, because at that point, hey, I don't even need to talk any further. Let's go find that
Let's
person.
go find them.
Let's put you
got a
guys
connection.
together.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And so I typically ask, how did you hear about the church? The second thing I usually ask is, I want to know, how long have you been in this area?
Yeah.
Did you move here from somewhere?
Yep.
Because typically it's funny, but Castle View is a transplant church.
It is.
We have very few quote unquote natives. Most of the people that come to our church have a lot of times just moved in the area from Texas. It seems like every other week I meet a Texas person from all over. New York on Sunday, I met a guy from New York. And so it's like, I'm trying to hear something about this person that will remind me of somebody else.
Yes. And this is really key. And I'm glad you're bringing this up. I wanted to get to this. So, and you said Texas. We have a lot of Texans and Californians that'll come in. It just seems like those are the two, most common. And so the Texans, what I'll do with them is we've got some folks in our church, John and Sarah Smith, Steve Peterson, Greg Smith.
Right.
I mean, we've got some people in our church that I automatically think of. And I think to myself, I want to get them to these people, introduce them because they're good at talking to people. And what have you done now? Now they have this natural connection. Oh, I'm from Dallas. Where are you from? Oh, we're just north of Dallas.
Right.
We're up in the Plano area. We're in this area here. Or we're in Houston. Or if you're from Texas, so Texas stuff, right? You love talking about Texas. And so I think that connection is really important. So that's a couple of the questions you ask. How'd you hear about the church? I'll always ask that. Where are you from? Anything else that you'll ask them?
Typically, the last question I ask them is typically the most impactful. And one of the things I'll say is, I'll ask them, have you been looking for a church for a while? And that that question opens up so many doors for so many people.
Yeah.
Because at that moment, you've just gotten real personal with them.
Yeah.
And then I've had people start crying. I've had people, all kinds of reactions in that question.
Yeah.
And typically the last thing I'll say is, well, look, I know that looking for a church can be an extremely stressful time for you and your family. So I'm going to pray for you guys that the Lord would help you to find wherever it is you need to be.
Yeah.
I don't push castle view on them. I don't try to say it needs to be this church or anything like that.
Yeah.
I typically just leave that. And,
But just for clarity, you don't recommend the church down the street either.
I don't.
Hey, I got the church for you. It's right over on.
Right. True.
So when you are introducing someone to someone else, like if it's a Texas connection
Right.
or a location, hey, I got a couple from, or maybe it's even an age that it's a young couple. Hey, we've got Don and Dee have this great class we
Yes.
want you to go
Right.
to and want to plug you into this life group. Why is it powerful that there's layers?
Well, the more layers you can add, the less likely it is that person's going to, if you only got one connection and that connection offends you, if that connection leaves, if that connection moves, but it just adds to their experience when they know more people.
Yeah.
And that's why I love life groups. Obviously I'm connected to a life group, and I say all the time that in life group, we do life together.
Yeah.
And that's why we're there. It's to go through these experiences together, share those in a group setting. You're hearing about this person's struggles. You're helping this person with their struggles, and, plug for life group. But I really think that the people that are plugged into life group are typically going to be people that it's not necessarily that they're not going through stuff, but that they're not going to go through it alone.
Yeah, that's a great statement.
Yeah.
Everyone's going through something.
Yes.
But you need somebody
Right.
to help you. As you
And
go through that.
when you're part of that life group, it's not just that connection's going through it with you.
Yeah.
Our whole life group is going through it together.
Yes. You've got a people praying for you. You've got a group of people
Right.
that love you, asking
Yes.
you about it and
All we-
following
yep.
up and providing meals if needed and all of that.
Yes.
So, very, very, very good. Let me ask you this. What are some do's and don'ts about introducing yourself to people?
I would start with the don'ts. It's just like when you're teaching your kid to drive, the first thing you want to teach them is the brake, not the gas. And so I would say the brake is when you're engaging with someone, don't talk about yourself. It's not about me in that moment. They don't care anything about, my experiences and stuff like that. So don't talk about yourself. The do is you want to make sure that you're asking them questions to get information and listen to the response. I think too often that we ask questions, but we're not really caring what the answer is, and we're not listening to what the answer is.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the most common question we do not listen to the answer to, what is your name?
That's right.
Yes.
You are legendary for remembering people's names. And this isn't by accident. And it's not because you've got a great memory. Okay, that's what it is right there.
The book.
The book. Okay,
Yeah.
tell me about the book.
So when you had asked me over a year ago, a year and a half ago, I don't even remember now, would you be willing to be part of our guest services team? And I can remember being very apprehensive because all my life I've been very good with numbers. I can remember phone numbers, batting averages, all these crazy statistics, but I stink at names.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I don't know about this, and so I thought I've got to figure out how I can remember these names. And so I got this book, and when people would tell me their name, I'd jot it down. And then
Do you do that right in that moment, right in front of them?
no.
Yeah,
I
no.
usually let them walk away. I'll turn and I'll
Yep.
write it down.
Yep. And how do you remember what name is with what person?
So if I can only do it by the week. So here's what I do is I will take those names, and then that week I will look over those names that I had written down. Typically you're looking at 4 to 6 to 8 names at most. And it's typically in pairs. You've got a man and a woman, John and Sarah, and so you've got those names together. And what I'll do is I will pray for those names that week. And I don't want to over spiritualize it,
Powerful.
but I do that. And so on Sunday mornings, every Sunday morning on the way to church, I will pray the same prayer. I will say, Lord, give me the knowledge of names. Lord, give me the knowledge of names. Help me to have the recall of the names. And I've studied those names that week.
So good.
I remember those names with the faces.
Yeah.
And so when that person comes walking back up for the very second time, I engage them using their name.
Yes.
And we had somebody a few weeks ago, it may have been last week. I had not seen them in weeks. They came one time, and it had been weeks before. But they came walking up, and I used the man and the woman's name.
Yeah.
And they were just blown away. I mean, they could not. And even Mike's like, "How did you remember the
How'd
name?"
you pull that back
and I was
out?
like, "I don't know."
Yeah. Well, you wrote them down. You've been praying over it. God help
Yes.
me to remember these names. So do you use any? Tate, large forehead, or gee, any tricks, or is it just okay? I'm going to remember that person by their names.
So what I do is I've learned this a long time ago. Is when I'm walking to a person to meet them for the first time.
Yeah.
I'm asking myself a question, and the question I always ask myself is, what is this person's name? Now, I don't know the person's name, but if I ask myself that question, I'm going to listen when they give me the answer.
Yeah, good.
So I'll say, what is this person's name?
Because isn't that the classic, hey, what's your name? But I'm thinking about what I'm going to say.
Yep.
I'm
You're
not
listening.
I'm not. And then another trick is use those names now in that conversation.
3 times.
Yes. And it'll help you lock
Yep.
it in. People love to hear their name.
They do.
Right? There's something about your own name.
Yeah.
It's personal, right?
Yes.
I mean, somebody knows who I am. You walk into a church for the first time, second, third, fourth time. Somebody knows who I am.
Right.
I'm not a number here. I'm a person.
Right.
I think it gives respect to somebody to share their name with them, and definitely gives respect to remember their name.
Absolutely.
For sure. So I think that's powerful.
Yeah.
So that's a do for
Yes.
sure. Okay. Any other do's or don'ts?
One of the things that I like to do is once you asked a few questions, you feel that rapport at that moment. Then, if there's time, I would like to tell them a couple of things and tell them with excitement. Man, you guys came on the right week.
Yeah.
You're not going to believe our pastor's preaching this series right now. He's talking about this morning. You got kids. Oh, I'm so excited to introduce you to Shelley, to Whitney.
Yes.
Sunday I was able to take a new family for the first time, Cody and Rachel. They had a little boy named Cash.
Okay.
3-year-old, cute kid.
Yeah.
And they came in, wasn't a ton of gas. And so I asked Shelley, I said, do you mind if I give them the tour of the childcare area? And I was so excited to point out these classrooms and pointing out people.
Yeah.
And, when you do something with passion, people is going to feel like it's something you care about.
Yeah.
If it's just like, that's the childcare area, and the last thing I would say to do is don't point, take.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's big to me. Like when I go to Lowe's or Home Depot and I say, hey,
It's over there.
I need this thing or whatever. My boys know this because it's a pet peeve of mine. If they point me across the store, it's just like, it's so frustrating. Take me there.
Yeah.
Don't point at it. Take me to that
Right.
place. And I love what you just said a minute ago, that you love to take them through. You have passion about it. Let me tell you about that's culture building. And I think we do have a number of people at our church that would share that enthusiasm and that passion that you have. But I wish I could clone you and just have a few hundred of you walking around that this is the most amazing thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you came to an amazing day.
Right.
Let me show you around this place.
Yeah.
This is where your kids are going to learn, and this is where we're going to share the
Right,
Bible story.
right,
This is, I just think there's something about that passion that rubs off.
Absolutely.
Listen, if you're not excited about your church, they're not going to be excited about your church.
No, they're always going to be a notch below.
They're always going to be a notch below.
Yeah.
So you better be.
You got to be on top.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm ready to go. One of the things I'd say don't say to people is, and sometimes this comes out first. Hey, is this your first time? And that's just
Right.
Most people can handle that. Like, well, they just haven't met me or they don't remember me. But every now and then you get someone go, I've been coming for like 3 months. You know what I mean? And if I do it especially, people don't want the pastor not to know that they've been there for 3 months, right? And I've heard from other people too that sometimes they can be a little off-putting. And so a better question than, hey, is this your first time, would be, hey, have we met? I'm not sure that we've met.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you may even know, I'm pretty sure this is their first time,
Right.
but they will tell you then,
Yes.
hey, no, actually it's my first time. So
Yes.
we've never met, or we've only been here a couple times. And so here's our names or whatever. And a little bit better conversation starter.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And people, it's like a sense of pride. Some people really want to feel like they've been going to church. And,
Yes.
And you've just torn that down and be like, you're so ununimportant that I don't even notice
You've
you.
never even been here before. You probably don't go to church
Right,
anyway.
right.
Yeah. So let me jump to this, because I think these studies are interesting. I think sometimes in a church, people wait for, Drew Shetler does an amazing job with all of our social media.
Yes. Absolutely.
And for a church our size, I think, you look out the social media and think, wow, that church has got something going on over there, because he makes us look really good. I think the danger of that is people look at that and say, hey, I don't need to invite anybody, right? We've got these Christmas services coming up. We've got our ladies event this coming Saturday. I don't need to invite anybody to that. We've got these events. And here's some studies that have been done by people that attend church. 6 to 8% of them walked in by their own initiative.
Okay. Yeah.
6 to 8%. If you are waiting for people just to fall into your building because they liked what they saw from the building, or they just got a hankering to go to your church, it's not that many.
No.
Right? 6 to 8%. 2 to 3% like a program that was offered. Maybe it's Awana, for example. And, we like that, and so we came to the church because of Awana. 8 to 10% like the pastor. That's probably
lower than ours.
Probably maybe 2 to 3% like the pastor in our church. That's whatever that's a small percentage of the people that are there. 3 to 4% had a need met by the church. Maybe it was a benevolence need, whatever. 1 to 2% were evangelized. Somebody met, led to Christ. Now they're coming to the church. 3 to 4% were attracted by the Sunday school. We call them life groups. But here's the stat that I want to get to. And I want our church to hear this stat. And Jeremy, you know this, but I want our church to feel this. Out of the people that attend church, out of these studies, 70 to 85% said they were invited by a friend or a relative. Why is that?
Because they already have a connection. They already have someone on the inside.
Bingo.
That they know, that knows them, and they can sit with them.
Yeah.
It's simple.
And how powerful are firsthand testimonies in the Google world, in the social media world? We might call them reviews. Right. Hey, I use this product and I loved it.
Right.
Oh, wow. Well, I've been looking for a product like that. Let me try. I know you, trust you. Let me try that. So when you recommend a church, they go, well, I know you, I respect you, they want to come, but then you just said something that's even deeper than that. It's not just the review, but now when that person comes to a service, Jeremy, the guest services, the pastor, they all said hello to me, but I've got a group of people now, I've got friends that I can sit with in the service.
The best advertisement is a satisfied customer.
Yeah.
I mean, you can spend all the money you want, but there's no greater advertisement than a satisfied customer.
Yeah.
And there's no greater way for our church to reach people than simply the testimony of our people.
That's right.
It's more powerful than any flyer, any mailer we can send out. Those things are effective. Don't get me wrong. We've got people at church now that are there because of those things, but what will really reach people is somebody on the inside.
I think the flyers, I think the mailers, I think the social media, I think the signage.
It's all effective.
I think it is, but that's icing on the cake, right? If somebody comes in because of that, wonderful. Well, we love that,
right?
But we can't depend on that. In a recent study, 83% of people said that if a friend invited them to church, they'd be willing to go.
Right.
Most of us don't think that way. Most of us are embarrassed, or a lot of us are a little shy, and maybe a little skittish about inviting someone to church. And we've got these studies that tell us 83% say, I'd say yes. What does that tell us?
Well, I mean, it tells you that we're simply not asking.
Yeah.
You know?
We have opportunities there
Yeah.
that we have not taken advantage of.
We're not capitalizing on it.
We're not capitalizing on those
Absolutely.
things. We're not capitalizing on those things. The Billy Graham Association recently had a study, and they said that the average Christian can identify 7 unchurched people that they have a personal relationship with. Can you imagine if our church went out, let's say the Christmas event coming up in a couple of weeks. Can you imagine if every one of our church members took 5 of those relationships and we all invited 5 people to church? We've got one of the cards at church. By the way, if you're not grabbing those cards at church, I don't know what you're doing. You know, we're doing everything we can to put something in your hand to be able to make it as easy as possible. If every person in our church, we had 350 people that invited 5 people, and 83% of those people did, in fact, let's say, no, we don't have that many, 50% of them. Let's say, wow, we really didn't do very well at all. 10% of those that were invited came. We wouldn't have, it's not a problem, we'll figure it out. We wouldn't have enough room to seat everybody at these events. The problem is not that we don't have people to ask. The problem is we're not asking.
Yeah. And these special services are such an opportunity because a lot of people will maybe not go if they don't feel that it's important. And anytime we can find, quote unquote, a reason, it's like, hey, we are doing something special this Sunday, and I would like for you to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And this is the opportunity. These type of services, our Christmas at Castleview service, is such a great opportunity. I remember last year at the Christmas at Castleview, we did it 3 services, I believe. And obviously we're doing guest services, is doing the guest cards. And I can remember that was the most guest cards that we had ever gotten, even more than this past Easter.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like, here is this person's chance to hear the gospel story.
Yeah.
And we have so much time and effort and energy put into this, and it's for naught if the person doesn't get the opportunity to come and hear it.
And our church's mission statement is leading people into a growing relationship with Jesus. And the on-ramp to that is salvation. And I've had people say before, we want to see more people saved. And I often say, I want to see more people saved. And my experience has been, we see people saved when we have unsaved people present, right?
It's pretty simple.
It's pretty simple. We don't see people saved when it's all a bunch of Christians and believers and we're just kind of all encouraged. And church still has a place, even for believers, obviously. But the evangelization part of that is, if we're not bringing people that don't know Christ, we're not going to see people introduced to Christ. And so I think we really need to begin to take this personally.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that you've taken it so personally. And like I said, I'd love to clone you. And I want our church to feel the passion that you have for this. And I want everyone to see that there's not something necessarily special about Jeremy Fincher, but Jeremy Fincher loves people. Jeremy Fincher is bought in to our church. He's bought into the mission of the church, and he wants to be a part of getting as many people into not just the church, into the kingdom of God, thriving in the relationship with God. And so I want people to see that everyone can be a part of this. Is there anything that you'd like to add to this conversation that we haven't talked about yet you'd like to end with?
2 quick things. Number one is that a fully mature church is not a perfect church. It's a failing church.
Yeah.
And, you know, every church needs a maternity ward. But the last thing I would say is that if there was anything that the people of Castleview could do to make the guest services team easier, it would be to not be a member, but be an owner.
Yeah.
And, you know, Wanda Randall, my first service, she was an owner.
Yeah.
She owned that section.
That's
you know, she owned those seats, and I was sitting in them.
Yeah, right. Recently, I told the church, listen, when you join the church, you joined the choir.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Right,
you joined the
right.
worship team. It's not a performance that is being done for you. You're part of this.
Right.
And when you joined the church, you became a part of the greeting team. You became a part of making other people feel as welcome as possible. And I love what you just said. A church is not perfect, but there needs to be different departments
Right.
in a church. There needs to be a maternity ward. We want to have that new birth. We want to see those.
Right.
But there's going to be an ICU in that hospital too.
Yep.
There's some hurting people. And I think our church needs to hear that too, that every weekend, even though we all come in with smiles on our face, behind the smile is oftentimes tears
Yes.
and a broken heart. And to be sensitive that when people walk into church, they might have that facade, they might be presenting something, but so many have things they're dealing with
Yes.
that week. You know some because you stand at that door and
Right.
people will share it with you. I know a lot of them because they share it with me as the pastor. And I just want people to know that their friendliness and their engagement and their care for somebody can mean so much more
Right.
than they ever could imagine it could mean in somebody's life.
And I would say that probably 3 of the last 6 weeks, just standing at the door, just being welcoming and inviting.
Yeah.
That 3 of the last 6 weeks, I've had one person each of those 3 weeks just
Unload.
just so broken.
Yeah.
They've known me all of 5 minutes, but they are looking for something.
Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes people don't engage because they don't know what to say. And because we don't know what to say, we say dumb things. And I found that sometimes the best thing to do is just walk into that pain with them.
Yeah.
To feel that pain. I am so sorry that you're going through what you're going through. And instead of giving them sometimes just a trite statement or even sometimes a Bible verse, sometimes where they are,
Yeah.
they're just struggling. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone, hey, would you mind if I just stopped and prayed
Right.
for that for you right
Yeah,
now?
absolutely.
And just stop and put an arm on their shoulder and just
Don't
listen.
wait.
Don't wait. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm
Don't say,
going to
"I'll
pray
do
for
it
you
later."
Hey,
No.
let me
Yeah.
pray for you right now.
You're at church.
You're at church. What better spot? You
Yeah.
know, why can't you just stop
Where
right
else?
here? And I really find that makes a big difference in a lot of
does.
people. You don't have to feel like you have to say something, but here's the word that I think we need to just highlight, and we'll be finished now. Engagement.
Uh-huh.
You know, everyone is part of the team. Every one of us is trying to engage with giving the gospel, meeting the needs of people in our church. And I think just paying attention makes such a big difference. Having some compassion. Jesus, he looks out, he sees the multitudes, and it touched his heart.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it ought to do for every church member every Sunday. When we see the people that come on our Christmas service, when we see people that come on Sunday mornings, it ought to touch our heart that, hey, these people came today
Right.
because they had a need and they need to be loved. And let me do my part
Right.
in doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, thank you for being here today,
you.
Jeremy. I really appreciate your heart, your spirit. Thanks for loving Jesus. Thank you for loving the church. And in Castleview, that really is a desire that I have, that he's got, that so many of you in our church, you've got the same desire. But I thought it'd be a good reminder. We're less than 2 weeks out from this major Saturday evening Christmas at Castleview and Sunday morning 2 services Christmas at Castleview. I want to encourage you, start praying now about who God wants you to invite, and then start inviting them. They're going to get the gospel. By the way, you're listening to the podcast right now. This is brand new information. People don't know this yet. These are the kind of perks you get from listening faithfully to the podcast. So here's a little bit of dropping news. We're going to have a nativity scene outside with sheep out there and some lambs out there. And we're going to have some shepherds out there, and your children will be able to come by, pet the sheep and the lambs. And we're working on getting some reindeer out there as well that day. So I think the kids will really enjoy that. But let me tell you something. The biggest thing we've got going on our Christmas at Castleview services is the gospel is going to be shared. And we've been praying for a long time. God, give us a building so that we can steward as many of these gospel conversations and as many of these people that are hurting as we possibly can. We're here. We've got the facility. We've got people interested. Let's do our part in making sure people understand the importance of sharing what we know and loving people when they come. Hey, thank you so much for listening once again to our Castleview Baptist Church podcast. Make sure you like this, subscribe to it, share it with other church members, share it with people that you feel like might be helped by it. But thanks for listening today, and we will see you next week. By the way, got a very special guest that's going to be taking over the podcast this next week. So you're going to want to make sure you listen for next week's episode as well. Have a great day. We'll see you next week.